out of India this morning, where authorities there say a passenger plane has crashed at an airport in Ahmedabad. This video shows heavy black smoke near the airport. Air India has confirmed that it was one of its planes that was traveling to London. We're going to bring in now CNN's Salma Abdelaziz. Salma, what details have you learned so far?
We just received word that there were 242 passengers and crew on board that flight, 242 souls. And when, of course, you look at these images, Adi, that we are looking at of this thick black smoke pluming from the site of the accident, of emergency crews rushing to that scene, it is very difficult to imagine if any of those 242 souls have survived this crash, which happened less than a minute after takeoff at only 625 feet. Of those 242 people on board, 169 are Indian nationals, 53 are British nationals, 1 Canadian national, and 7 are Portuguese nationals. That's according to an Air India statement. The airliner has also set up an emergency services center to provide support to the families and to provide support to those emergency crews on the ground. We've also heard from India's civil aviation minister, who says he is doing his utmost to provide whatever is needed for those rescue workers on the ground. But you look at those scenes again, the charred buildings, the crowds, the residents, you wonder how big the epicenter of damage is when it comes to this plane crash. This plane was also supposed to land here in London at about 6:30 local time at Gatwick. We've heard confirmation from Gatwick that that flight was expected, which means that families on this side could also be asking questions this morning as they try to find out, again, what happened to the 242 people on board that flight. For now, the focus is, of course, on the scene of the crash, where emergency rescue workers are working right now through the rubble, through the charred buildings, through the fires that you're seeing on your screen there. And the other focus, of course, the other epicenter, of course, is going to be this emergency services center that's been set up by Air India. You can expect that family members will be rushing there with questions, with fear, with worry and concern, Adi.
Joining me now to discuss, CNN transportation analyst Mary Scavo. Mary, first, let's just talk about it taking off and apparently crashing so soon after takeoff. What are you thinking as you hear the early reports about what's happening?
Well, as I hear the early reports, this is 787 Boeing Dreamliner. This will be the first major crash, the first crash of a Dreamliner. And as we can see, there's also some footage floating around out there on the internet. If it's correct, it does appear that the plane was just after takeoff. I don't see any flaps deployed. Now, flaps are like little winglets on the back of the plane, little parts of the wing that help give it lift. And you use those at various parts in the flight. I don't see those deployed. And also the important clue is that the pilot was able, according to unconfirmed reports, able to get off a mayday call. That means that the pilots knew they had a problem, some kind of a problem on the plane. We don't know yet if it's a mechanical or some other issue, but by being able to communicate that mayday call, we do know that the pilots were having trouble with the plane. So already there are many, many clues, but the explosion that was recorded on some tape that's floating on the internet, unconfirmed, does not look like it would have been a survivable crash, sadly and tragically.
We're showing images that we've been able to verify. I caution people out there about what you're seeing on the internet, but the images we're seeing here are incredibly striking. We're having people hand pull away luggage and materials from that crash scene. You mentioned the Dreamliner. What's significant about that? What was significant about this style of plane that draws your attention to it being the first to be in a crash?
What's significant is it was, when it came on the market, now admittedly several years ago, the newest, it had a lot of features on that aircraft that made the aircraft, how should we put this? It made the aircraft less susceptible, supposedly, to pilot errors. It had a lot of additional flight assists and other equipment. And of course, people will be thinking immediately about the Boeing crashes of the two 737 MAX 8 aircraft, not the same as this one. But in the course of that investigation, it was revealed that there was a lot of equipment on that plane that took the control away from the pilots, and that turned out to be deadly. It was called the mciahel, which drove the plane into the ground against the commands of the pilots. Now, from the video that's out there, and what happened is that the aircraft in those crashes pushed the nose down. The pilot pulled it up, the plane kept pushing the nose down. I don't see that in the one very short video clip, but some of the equipment is the same, and this is not the same aircraft as those two prior Boeing crashes, but that will put tremendous pressure on Boeing, on the investigators, on the regulators to see if there is any correlation between those crashes and the computer equipment and computer programming on this plane, which is, like I said, the newest, most modern plane of the Boeing fleet.
The last time we had you on CNN this morning, I believe you were talking about the crash in the Potomac, and you were talking about the difficulties created and having a recovery or a rescue scene over water. With this, it looks like it's right in a city. People are pulling some of this debris away from buildings, charred buildings. How do you even begin to investigate something that is in a scene like this?
Well, you know, and they've, you know, sadly, investigators have had to do this hundreds or well, literally thousands of times. And so what will happen next is literally an international team of investigators. It will be it will be the India's team. They will be the lead investigators because it happened in India. The United States National Transportation Safety Board will attend because it's a Boeing aircraft. So they will be invited into the investigation because the aircraft was made in the United States. And England will be involved, the UK, because there will be many passengers on there and it was bound for England. So it will be an international group of investigators. But the first thing they do is, of course, you know, try to remove any survivors and, of course, all remains. And then they're going to be looking for those black boxes. This aircraft has the newest, most modern version in the world of black boxes. It will record, you know, hundreds of different settings on the plane. If it was having a mechanical, chances are it will be recorded on the flight data recorder. If the flaps were not set correctly, for example, it will be on the flight data recorder, and the cockpit voice recorder will record whether or not there was a mayday call and what they were able to say they perceived going wrong with the aircraft when they got the mayday call out, if that's correct. So the next order of business will be to get those black boxes. Because the plane was American made, they will likely be downloaded. The data will be downloaded in the United States outside of Washington, D.C. There's a lab, but it doesn't have to be. India can do it too. Britain can do it. So those will be the first steps in the investigation, in addition to, of course, identifying and getting the passenger list, the manifest of who, you know, who all was on board, notifying everybody, and setting up what's called a care team. The airlines are required to have a care team to care for the families, to care for the persons who, you know, may have survived, to provide medical care, counseling care, to provide immediate cash support to those families of anyone on the plane to get there, to hear the briefings on the investigation, etc. So there are a lot of moving parts right now, most of which are all covered by regulations and by international laws and treaties. Because it was an international flight. So it will be rather according to the book, as they say, and those very same laws, regulations, and treaties will require an initial preliminary report within 30 days. So sadly, this will not be the first go-round on these kinds of investigations. We've seen an awful lot lately.
So the person I'm bringing in now, former Deputy Assistant Secretary of State Joel Rubin, is here to talk more. Joel, one of the reasons why I wanted to talk to you is because there were 53 British nationals, but also a Canadian, 7 Portuguese nationals, as well as 169 people from India. That's a lot of families.
A lot of people.
Who are reaching out to whom, and what do diplomats end up doing in these situations?
You got it, Audie. And first of all, what a horrible moment, and thank you for discussing it this morning so extensively. At the State Department, what happens is you have essentially the Operations Center kicks in and creates a task force that begins to mobilize to deal with all these questions. So our Consular Bureau will send a representative to it. The Bureau that handles South Asia will send a representative to it, and they'll begin coordinating with all of the airline infrastructure that's needed to be engaged,
and this is
as
different
well as
from,
foreign
for
governments.
instance, Air India has to have, we heard from Mary Scavo, a care team for people and families to reach out to. But
this is all about diplomatic communications. I mean, we don't know if there are any Americans. I mean, we don't think there are any Americans, but we don't know, and there may be many dual citizens who are Indian as well. And so figuring that out, working with our consulate on the ground in Ahmedabad, working with our embassy as well in New Delhi, and getting a real lay of the land and what the U.S. government then should be thinking about in terms of providing assistance, which is the sort of overarching American diplomatic role as well.
God.